밑턴 치고 넘어가.
밑턴 엔터.
엔터 치고 넘어가.
Thank you, organizers, for inviting me to this interesting international conference. My name is Sukjoo Sohn from Donghwa University in Busan. It's a series of coincidences that led me to participate in this conference. Earlier this year, I published an article on a novel by an Indian author from the perspective of Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So I had gathered the materials on Zarathustra and also Dionysus, for whom Nietzsche had great admiration as opposed to Apollo. In October, I met Professor Hwa-sun Lee in Busan, and she invited me to give a talk on a history of Indian liquor. It was a tempting offer, but I was a bit hesitant because I'm not a specialist in Indian liquor. But I just remembered that I had a stock of files on Dionysus, and so because the Greek god of wine, Greek wine god, is connected to India in terms of the alcohol route. So I've come to believe that I can discuss the history of alcohol in India through the meeting of the East and the West. As you might know, in India, tea is the most popular drink. So if you go there, you'll see this kind of scene, drinking tea on the streets. It is ubiquitous, and roadsides are dotted with the tea stalls which serve it boiled up with milk, sugar, and spices. According to data, India consumes 837,000 tons of tea every year. And yet, India is one of the fastest growing alcohol beverages markets in the world. It is the third largest market for alcohol beverages in the world, with an estimated value of $52.5 billion, according to data. India is considered as the largest consumer of Scotch whiskey in the world. And to put a number around India's love for alcohol, India consumes over 3 billion liters of spirit and 28 million bottles of local wine to quench their thirst every year. However, there are a few states like Bihar and Gujarat which have prohibited alcohol consumption. Since Narendra Modi took office in 2014, there have been growing rumors about nationwide alcohol prohibition. But it seems impossible as there is no provision in the Indian constitution related to it. This kind of internal contradiction, which is usual in such a huge and diverse country like India, stems from its ancient history, from mythical days through colonial times, especially in its encounter with the West. So in this presentation, I would like to focus on exploring the root of alcohol in mythical and colonial India and its effects on modern India. First of all, the East and West are connected through alcohol in the story of Dionysus, the Greek god of wine. In Greek mythology, Dionysus was born between Zeus, the king of gods, and Semele, a human being. Semele was deceived by the jealous Hera into asking Zeus to show his appearance, ending up being burned to death after seeing the god in person. But Zeus rescued Dionysus by storing his yet unborn child inside his thigh. Later, Dionysus, who was banished from his hometown Creta, fled to Egypt and learned to make wine there, which became identical with him as a Greek god. This route of his travel shows that winemaking skills were passed from Egypt to Creta and then to Greece proper. Dionysus was revered as the god of wine in Creta as far back as 1000 BC, according to historical materials. The story of Dionysus does not stop in the West. Legends had long connected Dionysus with Asia, especially India. The Dionysiac Dionysiaca is an ancient Greek epic in 48 books written by Nonnus in the 5th century. It is the longest surviving poem from Greco-Roman era at 20,426 lines. Its main subject is the life of the Greek god of wine, his expedition to India, his triumphant return to the West. Yes, it is about Dionysus, not Alexander the Great king, the Alexander the Great, who had long been believed to conquer India. The story of the Dionysiaca begins with Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, ordering Dionysus to travel to India, whose inhabitants refused to worship him. The Indians stubbornly prefer their ancestral gods for fire and the gods of fire and water. Worse still, they refuse to drink wine. So Dionysus gathers an enormous army and returns home after his victory, of course, having taught the art of winemaking to various Asian cultures, including India. So alcohol is first mentioned in the Vedas, the sacred Sanskrit canonical text of Hinduism. Among other texts, the Rig Veda, believed to have been written around the 15th century before Christ, BC, talks about alcoholic beverages like soma. The Rig Veda is the most ancient literature available on India now. It indicates that fermentation technology took its first step in connection with the preparation of soma in India. Fermentation technology is as old as the Vedas in ancient India. There's also another drink known as sura, prepared by fermentation too. These two drinks have also been used in different medicinal preparations, surgical procedures, and in many chemical and alchemical operations. Usually soma is offered to gods, while sura is for humans. The Rig Veda has a hymn which shows that soma was kept in leather containers and freely sold to all comers. It is possible that soma was freely consumed. Many passages in the Rig Vedas praise soma as an ambrosia of immortality drunk by gods, and a ritual elixir with spiritual powers consumed by human beings. Soma is also worshipped as a god, the moon god. Like Indra and many other Vedic gods were soma drinkers, but they do not seem to have been tipplers. Elaborate rules for preparation of this intoxicating liquor show that the liquor was enjoyed by the elites, not the common people. The later Vedas do not endorse drinking, actually, and prohibit the use of spirits to satisfy the senses, saying, wine is unfit to be drunk, unfit to be given, unfit to be accepted. So this is the first example in the history of India where the right of drinking alcoholic beverages is disputed and denied. Later, a compromise is reached by sanctioning the use of liquors at ceremonial and sacrificial functions only, while condemning its common usage. In the age of Manu, the period around 500 BC, who is believed to be the progenitor of humankind in ancient India, Manu set strict rules for the prohibition of drinking. While previous moralists allowed the use of liquor for religious purposes, Manu opposed to this indulgence, and he's determined to abolish this practice. So he therefore puts restrictions on the sale of some soma by regarding a seller as a low person. So like the Vedic text, the Indian epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana, as you can see on the PPT, these provide the evidence that those who enjoy godly status in Hindu religion used alcoholic beverages. Both in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the two major Sanskrit epics of ancient India, there are frequent references to drinking. This suggests that the habit was not uncommon. In the Mahabharata, Baladev and Krishna and Arjuna indulged in drink in the company of their wives, daughters, and sisters. And the sage Bharadvaja offered wine in his hospitality to Bharata and his soldiers. Also in the Ramayana, written around 400 BC, about 10 kinds of alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages are mentioned. In its opening, Dasharatha, the king of Ayodhya and Rama's father, offers heavenly wine to his queen as part of a ritual to have sons between them. Here, alcohol means a way of purification and rebirth. Besides Sita, Rama's wife, offers the goddess Ganga 1,000 jars of sura and meat for her safe crossing the river. However, there are no references to any woman drinking, suggesting that at that time drinking was not indulged in by women. And the medical text of Charaka. Charaka is one of the main contributors to the Indian traditional medicine Ayurveda. These texts are believed to have been written as far as the 4th century BC. They list as many as 84 alcoholic beverages made from grains and fruits, providing detailed accounts of its consumption in India. However, a scholar and the writer Mangadip Singh retraces the root of alcohol in India, arguing that the real encounter with alcohol starts in India with colonialism, specifically the British. However, Muslims' conquest of Hindu India also contributed to the development of alcohol. The distillation technology of alcohol was first introduced from the Middle East to India. It was widely used from the Sultanate period starting in the 13th century to the Mughals in spite of the Islamic ban on alcohol. These ruling Muslim minorities ruled over the Hindus, which lasted until the British East India Company took over India in the 18th century. Whereas the Indian politician Shashi Tharoor says the one real positive thing out of the British colonial rule was tea, Singh and other scholars find that Indians owe their secular drinking habit to the British gin, India Pale Ale, Scotch, and the English punch. A little known fact is that the punch was first introduced to the West from India, not the other way around. The word punch originates the Sanskrit panch, meaning 5, alluding to the 5 basic constituents of a punch. And also the Portuguese brought along their wines and left Indians with the feni, distilled out of the cashew fruit. Feni is a liquor mostly produced in former Portuguese colony, Goa on the southwestern coast of India. The two most popular types of feni are cashew feni and toddy palm feni, depending on ingredients. By the 16th century, Europeans invaded Asia and America to colonize them, but no European nation attempted to do so with the powerful Mughals in India. The Muslim rulers in India lasted until the 17th century. In 1632, the Mughal emperor repelled and expelled the Portuguese, who had been building unauthorized fortifications in Bengal. With this in mind, the British East India Company tried to establish a relationship with the Mughals before embarking on some trade. So after a few failed attempts, the company persuaded King James to send the royal envoy. The man chosen was Sir Thomas Roe, the person in the middle of the PPT, a diplomat, courtier, member of parliament, and explorer. In 1615, Roe finally arrived in India, bringing many gifts for the Mughal emperor. Among them was many crates of red wine, of which Emperor Jehangir was known to have a fondness. The emperor was a hearty consumer of alcohol and liked to drink. When Rome was finally granted an audience, all the Mughal emperor cared to know about was beer. So Jahangir asked him these questions: how often he drank a day, and how much, and what beer was, and how is it made, and whether he could make it in India. India fell to the British East India Company about 140 years after this conversation, when the company's 1757 victory in the Battle of Plassey brought control of India to the British. At the request of the East India Company, English brewers developed a strongly hopped pale ale for export to India. So India Pale Ale, well known in Korea and other countries, actually started as early as 1815, and it became a popular export beer shipped to India, which was under the control of the East India Company. So around this time, Britain enforced the colonial policies to transform Indians into royal subjects. The imperial aim was succinctly summarized by Thomas Babington Macaulay, who arrived in India for its governance more than 200 years ago. According to him, the British have to create a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions of Indians whom we govern, a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, morals, and in intellect. So after the British arrived in India, drinking became a legacy of British Empire. The representation of drinking is well captured in modern Indian novels too. Salman Rushdie, the most famous British Indian author, explores the history of India by employing alcohol and alcoholism as lenses through which to explore the cultural, political, and medical legacies of British Empire. So Rushdie's Midnight Children is the most famous Indian novel recognized worldwide so far. It won the Booker Prize in 1981, then the Booker of Bookers Prize in 1993, which commemorated the award's 25th anniversary, and the Best of the Booker in 2008 in commemoration of the Booker Prize's 40th anniversary. So it won the Booker Prize 3 times. Midnight Children is a loose allegory for events in India both before and primarily after the independence and partition of India in 1947. The novel is semi-autobiographical. Born into a liberal Muslim family of wealthy parents, Rushdie grew up in a Bombay marked by cosmopolitanism and a metropolitan secularism. His father, Anis Ahmed Rushdie, took up business after a career in law, but he later turned to drink and was eventually to succumb to dipsomania. Rushdie's father is the model of Ahmed Sinai, the novel's protagonist Salim's father in the novel. He is a shrewd businessman who is nevertheless destined for failure because of alcohol. Drinking is integral to Ahmed's mimicry of the West in the novel. Alcohol was both a mark of Westernization and a status symbol in India during the colonial period. Alcohol imports to India actually increased 900% between 1875 and 1928, meeting the demands of a newly anglicized Indian middle class, such as Ahmed himself. So there is no formal prohibition of alcohol in Hinduism. Unlike Islam, Hinduism does not prohibit anyone from drinking alcohol as such, but it emphasizes that people use it in restraint and is aware of its potential side effects in case of misuse. However, drinking is regarded as an antisocial activity in India now, so it imposes excessive sin tax. Some local governments, dominated by neo-Puritans, prohibit alcohol consumption. Alcohol prohibition in India is enforced in the states of Bihar, Gujarat, Mizoram, and Nagaland. So all other Indian states and union territories territories permit the sale of alcohol except these states. So among the banned states, Gujarat has banned alcohol consumption since 1960 as a homage to Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi had viewed alcohol worse than any other evil. Policing pleasure associated with alcohol consumption is criticized for dragging people back to the Gandhian age. Gujarat is the only Indian state with a death penalty for the manufacture and sale of homemade liquor that might result in death, but moonshining, bootlegging, and illicit sale of alcohol are common in these provinces. So numerous deaths result from the consumption of methyl alcohol. Gujarat has witnessed several occasions of alcohol poisoning, claiming the lives of more than 400 people after the ban was enforced. So nowadays in India, along with the toddy and mahua, desi daru is probably the most popular indigenous alcohol drink available. Desi daru is fermented and distilled from the byproduct of sugarcane called molasses. Desi liquor is a broad term, actually, so it can include both legally and illegally made local alcohol. The term Desi daru usually refers to legal alcohol, but other types of Desi daru, such as arak and palm toddy, may be categorized as moonshine alcohol. Apart from the locally produced wine and alcohol drinks by the tribes, Desi daru now is the mainstay for a major rural population in India. Okay, I think I covered the history of alcohol consumption in mythical and colonial India, and also I dealt with some issues they are facing now in present India. So I think my time is up. Thank you for listening. So I'll just let the Professor Liu take over the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sohn. That was a lot of information. Now I know where Aldous Huxley got the name Soma for his famous novel Brave New World. Okay, well, next we have Professor Yu Chul-in from Jeju University. His topic of speech today is Food and Soul as Intangible Cultural Heritage. Jeju, Gosori Sul, and Ryuku's Awamori. Please welcome.